Remember when I was a boy, and I remember.
We have been talking about the parenting teaching offered by Doug and Nancy Wilson in Canon Press, and particularly looking at the idea of alpha parenting, as well as some prosperity gospel parenting promises made to parents about covenants, belonging, and faith guarantees in the lives of their children and children's children. But I want to spotlight here an interview with Doug Wilson.
I remember when I was a boy, and I remember where I was standing in the front yard when my father put his fist in my face.
I first read this story in Why Children Matter, and Doug recounts this same story, and it made me sad when I read it, and again here when I saw him as an older man, remembering this iconic moment of his father putting his fist in his face and kind of laying down the family rules. And you see this adversarial parent-child relationship modeled again and again throughout the parenting principles offered to everyone sitting under Doug's teaching. This makes one family's experience normative for everyone. In fact, it reminds me a lot about Dobson when he writes about his mother's swift and physical punishment of him, her kind of brooking no nonsense. And so you definitely see the generational impact of even these parenting experts being raised by certain models that they accepted as godly and important for everyone, and then passing that on as normative for everyone else. Because here, Doug is saying these are his father's rules, but he's offering them to countless families as God-endorsed rules.
And he laid down 3 rules. In our house, there were 3 rules.
Okay.
No lying, no disobedience, and no disrespecting your mother.
Okay.
Okay? No lying, no disobedience, no disrespecting your mother. And that covered it, right?
All right.
Basically, if you have a house where the children don't lie and they obey you and they don't pop off at mom, then you've got a habitable household.
Yeah.
Right?
A couple of things here. First, note that the goal is making the home habitable for parents. So the environment being pleasant for parents is the motivation for those rules, not necessarily the well-being of the children. Certainly from a Christian perspective, there's no discussion here of are these modeled on the way of Jesus, right? Which other places in the book and all throughout this teaching, that's woven throughout. So on one hand, you have elsewhere here, Doug is going to say, spanking pleases God. When parents spank children, they're pleasing God by doing that. So those sorts of claims are paired up next to these. And a parent walks away thinking, here's a spiritual authority telling me God endorsed, kind of baptized ways to parent, and just soaking it all up. And the parenting expert is going to sit in that seat and posture their experiences as normative, their opinions and advice as God endorsed, and hand that off to people, often with guarantees that really can't be proven false. Because again, if it didn't work out for you, well, you didn't enforce it well enough. You weren't alpha parent enough. You didn't try hard enough or believe hard enough if it didn't work out for you.
We won.
And I remember it vividly because we lived in this little duplex, and I pulled into the driveway, and Nate was sitting out in the living room on the couch, believing with all his heart that he had won. And he saw the car pull into the driveway, and I saw a little, he's got his hair shaved off, but a little blonde head jumped off the couch and headed for the bedroom. See, he wanted to get under the covers and start snoring.
Yes.
But
I'm obeying now, Daddy.
And one of the things that we taught them was, and particularly to a son, because when boys see mom, they see a woman, and they don't necessarily want to be under the authority of a woman. So Doug would say, I want you to always see me right behind, my shadow looming right behind mom.
It comes up in a couple other of their conversations with Doug and Nancy I've been listening to. This idea of not disrespecting your mother. They describe it elsewhere as though if you, child, need to obey your mother as though the father was kind of looming behind her. So this, of course, fits in with the ideology of patriarchy, which would say, actually, the mother doesn't have the authority over a child, particularly boys. They talk about how boys don't want to listen to women. So they really need the authority of the father looming behind the mother. And separate from this, it's really interesting to think about the long-term impacts of this kind of approach that doesn't teach children how to respect a woman in any capacity unless there's a man behind her. So in again, you get other stowaway teaching in here. And here we have the dehumanization of women, even though it's cloaked in this language of like, oh, it's really important that you respect your mother. Well, no, the assumption is a child won't respect the mother unless the father requires it. Current parents or those listening to these teachers might look for those markers and say, what here is being offered is just someone's experience they had growing up. What here is just something they did in their family. And that can help deflate this advice that's consistently being thrown out there as God's way or godly advice down to just someone's suggestion.